When the first fugitive slaves heard about London, Ontario on their journey to freedom, one must wonder what they would have been told about the place. A small but growing community, nestled deep in the woods of the Canadian wild, an inland city, safe from bounty hunters and slave catchers, a land where a black family could truly be free and live as equals to others. They may have been the first blacks to immigrate to the now modern city, but certainly weren't the last. Their roots sown here in London has brought blacks from all different parts of the world to the city throughout its history, since just after London's first settlement and up to the modern day today. I'm Justine Turner, and 2 years ago I set out on a mission to bring this culture and history to life on film. Much of black history in the city has been oral to this point. There needed to be a way to connect it all together. What I found as I started talking to people astounded me, a rich history that had been hidden away, told only amongst friends and family for so long. As a starting point, I reached out to some local historians who shared some fascinating stories on the origins of black settlement in the city. And so, the conversations began.
The American Fugitive Slave Law was passed in the 1850s, and that made it very easy for slave owners and slave traders to go into the north of the United States and into Canada and capture former slaves and take them back to their masters, former masters, and they would be paid for it. So a lot of that activity began to erupt.
These laws were very restrictive. London and Chatham become very important because both London and Chatham are fortified with descendants of Simcoe's troops that he sent down to the different battalions.
Initially, when black Londoners came, they were very much accepted because they had skills that were needed to grow the city. In a couple of years, 3 years I think, they could obtain British citizenship. So in fact, many of them did. That was one of their goals.
Yes.
And so they had a number of goals that what were called black conventions, where people would gather more so in the 1850s in the southwestern peninsula and talk about strategies about how black people could prosper in freedom. So they would have like wealth accumulation, pursuit of the trades, agriculture, and so on. And it was for two purposes. One was to show that black people under the right conditions, that is freedom and the ability to own land, would flourish.
Right.
And the other was to show the people in the States and people like Lincoln that that was the case and they should be free.
Abraham Lincoln was, and according to the Americans, the first to abolish slavery. That being said, that is totally false. It's John Graves Simcoe and his Solicitor General Robert Graves who produced the first act against slavery and to try and eliminate slavery. One of the first things that Simcoe passed when he arrived here in 1793.
A commission that comes into southwestern Ontario and goes around to look at all the black-only settlements and the racially integrated settlements to see how they're faring in freedom, because Lincoln knows that he's going to free the slaves when the Civil War is over,
Right.
and he wants to know what to expect. So they come to places like London and examine the black experience and how they're doing, and many black Londoners were doing quite well.
Certain people in the black community, they become the richest in all of Canada. I mean, absolutely huge money, and you don't hear about this anywhere else. So London starts taxing these people, and that leads to the integrated schools, because the blacks would say, hey, if you're going to tax us, then we're going to use the schools.
Education was something they desperately wanted for their families because they saw it as a tool for advancement.
Of course.
So 5 or 6 years later, their children would be ready to go to school. Mm-hmm. And so when the wave came in, 5 or 6 years later, there was, a wave of young black children wanting to go to school. And by the time the 1860s come along, there's a fair number of black Londoners who are between the ages of 13 and 16. And so there is an incredible crisis in the schools.
We learned from this that the old barracks in Victoria Park was where they had the first, it was an integrated school, which was run by St. Paul's Cathedral.
I wanted to find out more about the school, so I met with London's Heritage Director, Don Menard, who shared some insights at Victoria Park.
Black and white kids would go to school together in the same building and share the same teachers. And the site we're at today is Victoria Park, but Victoria Park in the 1840s and 50s was not a park, it was the site of the British Army garrison. And so there are a number of garrison buildings here, including infantry barracks like this. The local activists started to push for a school where black kids could go.
Yes.
They had a building, and so for several years they used rooms in this particular building. Within a year, they had 450 students. Now this would be both black and white students. The population of London itself probably was somewhere around 12 to 15,000. So, and the black community was a small portion of that, but still a significant portion.
Sure it was.
The schools actually became one of the, for me as a historian, to look at the experience in schools as one of the crucibles by which you can really examine what's going on in the larger society.
Those early experiences for blacks served as a springboard. Although some prejudice existed, in large part blacks found themselves in an accepting society. And with education and drive, the entrepreneurial seed sowed years ago created a culture of success and leadership for many.
I was really passionate about wanting to give back because I came here as a refugee. So I always grew up feeling indebted to Canada and to Canadians. So I wanted to feel a way of kind of repaying that debt. And I felt that, you know, what better way to do it than to be in the military. And, you know, at that time when I decided to join, it was post 9/11. I am a Muslim. So, I mean, there was those reservations. I would watch movies, and I remember watching some movies where there was about racism, like, you know, Tuskegee Airmen and things like that. So I was, and again, there wasn't like movies about a black man being in the Canadian military, a black woman being in the Canadian military. So all I could have was through those experiences and say, okay, maybe there's racism. So I was at ways kind of, you know, had reservations about joining, but I was so determined to join. And then I remember just a couple months after I decided to join, just a few months before I decided to join, Michelle Jean became Governor General. She became Governor General, and she was a black woman. And here I was just about to join, and I was like, well, if the Commander-in-Chief is black, I think it should be okay. And
Hello. The conversation then shifted to his motivation behind running for ward councillor.
I felt as if there was a potential for me to do more, to have more of an impact in my community, and to really be a role model that I was already being shaped out to be by others around me. Whether it was the youth that would see me and be like, oh, that's the guy who's in the army, or, you know, or just anyone in general that I've come in contact with. This was something that kind of naturally happened. It was a natural transition from one service to another, but this maybe has more of a benefit to the greater community, and I felt that this is a better way of sharing myself, because I could bring my experiences to impact and influence decisions that impact a lot of people who sometimes feel marginalized, and for rightfully so. Overall, the public was very supportive and didn't really see race as an issue. They voted for me at the end of the day based on what I was hoping to deliver. Every day I'd walk into work and know that I can make a difference. That's what I wanted to do, and that's why I set out to say I'm going to take this risk, because there's a lot of great people that should have run or should run but choose not to because of the fear deters folks.
And so we travel to different places outside of Middlesex and London here, and I speak, and Helen sings. So on occasions, places will call us, churches will call us, organizations, and I'll go about doing what I have to do to send a message to the students and also the staff or the adults, and really it's to encourage people, to empower them, and just to educate them as well. Try to really help students understand, and also the staff, the significant contributions of people of different racial groups. Then I do a lot on racism as well, and also on cultural differences, because we're noticing that, I mean, the context of the city here and also the world is changing. People from all over the world are coming here, and they're assuming Canada's their home. So how do we make people feel comfortable, and how can we learn from each other? And then I talk about self-esteem, you know, really trying to figure out your self-worth and confidence, and how to exercise that to make a difference in people's lives.
We went to a school, and when we went to the school, the teacher told us that there was a student there.
Yeah.
Actually, this is after the presentation, that the student wanted to commit suicide. But his friend told him to wait till after the presentation, Leroy's presentation. And after his presentation, the young man gave his friend a note and said, "I've changed my mind."
Oh my God.
That really blessed us and touched our
amazing.
hearts, knowing that we were able to make a difference in that way.
I heard of a story. I believe his name is Andrew Carnegie, and apparently he was a business owner in America. And so what happened was, many people that were impoverished or in poverty worked for him for a period of time, and after they worked for him, they did very, very well, successful financially, and so this happened many, many times. And so what happened, the people in the public were trying to figure out, what is he doing? And so they wanted to interview him, I guess the newscasters.
Right.
So they did an interview with him, and they just asked the question, simply put, what are you doing to cause people's life to change so drastically? And he said, that's very easy. He said, working with people is like mining gold. He said, you have to go through tons and tons of dirt to get to the gold. But he said the key is you go in looking for the gold, not the dirt.
Amen on that. I had a cup of tea with Maureen Jenkins, past president of the Congress of Black Women, who told me about their founding and a special connection the organization has with London.
You know, because there were certain things like that were of interest to you, like health concerns and things that you could look at, again, the youth, and that we thought we could delve into in a deeper fashion. We found at the London police station, which is very kind of, as I said, we fell into the arms of the law. There's a room for community use.
Oh,
so
lovely.
we certainly
Lovely.
make use of it. So one of the things that we immediately started doing was raising money to give scholarships to encourage students to go on to post-secondary education.
That's wonderful.
And we've done that for 25 years. It was such a pleasure to be on that committee because we were so
The self-gratification.
enthused to hear young students speak. Some of them were so enthused about going on and what their hopes and dreams were.
Right.
So if you have someone behind you to give you some financial aid and some help.
I sat with William Turner, who spoke of how he started London Blueprint and duplicating service.
I always had that drive to do something. I could feel it in me because I was always trying to do something. I went over to a place called VR Brokers on Dundas Street. And the chap, he took me in, and I thought he would just go over and be real quick with me about the different businesses they have, and I'll see you later. But he said to me, he says, "Bill, I like you. Do you know anything about blueprinting?" And I told him, yes, I used to run the blueprint machine all the time at Union Gas Company. And he said, well, I got just the business for you across the street. Everything's still there.
Okay.
And right away a light bulb went on in my head like, oh, this can't be true.
Deep in the Westminster Ponds forest, there is a tree, an ancient friend of escaped slaves. It is known as the meeting tree, and legend has it that the first blacks looking for freedom in London found themselves under its protective branches.
Trees like this, during the days of the Underground Railroad, were geographical landmarks that people used to go towards. They'd come to an area and they'd be told, head left, look for a big oak tree on a hillside, or look for this rock outcrop. And this is what helped people to navigate geographically.
Nowadays, the 650-year-old meeting tree is a host to the Emancipation Day celebrations, its majestic arches once again inviting its friends back into its home.
London, and I lived in the East End of London, which was known as at the end of Glenwood Ave and Trafalgar.
Okay.
And the school I attended was Ealing Public School.
Right.
Having grown up in our neighborhood, there was lots of kids.
Yes.
And basically, we played all day. We made up games, we played baseball, we played football, and we just played. It was like a training camp. But all the kids from 5 to 16 in our neighborhood, we all intermingled and played games together, whether it was tag or anything. The city was divided into playground communities. And Silverwoods Park, McMahon Park, Thames Park, and Gibbons Park were considered the senior parks. Now, some of these black children didn't live in the Silverwoods district, so they had to go to the park that was in their district to compete. And that was close to home. They had their friends there. It didn't matter about color.
Okay.
It was team. It was a place where we could attain goals.
Right.
And these goals were fitness goals.
Okay.
Levels of fitness.
Okay.
When we went out and we attained a certain standard, they'd put a star under that event by your name.
Okay.
But before that, there may have been a red star
Right.
for the second, or a blue star.
Right.
So they had the blue, red, and gold.
Wonderful.
So you always wanted to get that goal.
Absolutely.
When I graduated from Teachers College, I was invited to play on this Dow Kings, and so basically it was like we had to go through play downs, and as it progressed, they would pick up players and drop players. It was like tryouts.
Okay.
And they went on to win the Canadian Championship. Basically, because they had won the Canadian Championship, they were eligible to go to the Olympics. They had the nucleus of the team selected, and then they picked up about 3 or 4 other guys. I was on the team through that way of how they selected it, and I was recognized in that and invited. Because Canada hadn't done well in previous basketball Olympics or in international basketball, they had to play in a qualifying round to go into the Olympics.
Okay.
So we had to go 2 weeks earlier to play a preliminary Olympic tournament. 4 of the top teams had to place, and they went into the Olympics in Tokyo. So this official said, if you guys qualify for the Olympics, we will reimburse you your airfare and some of your other expenses. As it turned out, we ended up in 2nd place. We got to the village, and when we got there was no place for us to stay. They weren't expecting us, as it turned out. Then we played in the 16-team tournament.
Okay.
We played quite a few games in our first 2 weeks, and we only had a couple of days off. But all in all, we ended up 13th out of 16 teams.
13 out of 16.
And you say, well, 13 out of 16, well, that's not very good. Well, if you consider the struggle we had, we only did it for 6 weeks, we only practiced. And also, we only had 2 exhibition games against a Lithuanian team. And that was an honor, being there for your country, and especially in the preliminary tournament, we did so well.
Marion Turner shared a story on how she became the Buffalo Bills' first black cheerleader, when she was known then as Marion Hernandez.
Buffalo Bills football game, I believe it's on a Sunday, and we were watching the game, and my girlfriend had these binoculars, and I asked her, could I see the binoculars? And I wanted to look down at the field where they were playing, and I could see there weren't any black cheerleaders, which seemed very odd to me. So I asked my girlfriends, because they were there from Buffalo, and I asked them, how come? They said, oh, they are Prejudice, and they don't allow any black girls to be on the cheerleading squad. So anyway, I thought that was really, didn't sound right to me. So when I went home, I I called around, and I did the same thing on the next day, Monday, and I called around to see who I could talk to. I got in touch with the lady that was the squad leader, and she told me that they've been looking for black girls for a long time, but they just couldn't find any. Well, how have you been trying to find? She said, oh, we've been looking for a long time. I said, well, gee whiz, it just seems odd that most of the players are black, and that you should have some black girls on the squad. And she said, well, would you like to be a cheerleader? Can you get yourself and your girlfriend and come to the school for the next practice?
Right.
And so you can learn the cheers. And my girlfriend and I, we did go. And the following weekend, I was down cheering with the Buffalo Bills.
52 career points, and if he scores 11 points tonight in tonight's game, he breaks the all-time record set by Jerry Rice from Mississippi Valley State and now the 49ers of San Francisco.
I went back with Jeff Mitchell to Sir Wilfrid Laurier High School, where he spoke about his early football career.
After the media gets a hold, and at the time it was London Free Press, it was Morris Delacosta that did the interview. After the 400-yard game, that will get you a lot of attention. A gentleman by the name of Steve Bruno, he was coaching in the East Coast, and he had a Weber State connection in Utah. I never met him to this day. He called me up and says, I'm going to have a coach call you up because you're projected one of the top running backs in Canada. At the time, you're 19, you don't really comprehend that. It just sounds like, and you're really not getting it. So I got a call and they wanted me to write the SAT test, and then everything was in motion, signing a letter of intent. At that time in the city, when you win a championship, the jacket was more important than the ring. So you could walk around with your leather jacket. This is the sign of the times. That said champions on it, and we had the jacket guy come through our school in order to order the jackets before the championship, and we lost in the finals. But it was a great learning experience because we lost to Montcalm. We didn't lose ever again. We never lost again.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
We went 2 years after that not losing the game.
I can't help it.
It still hurts.
Then we found the door to his football team's locker room.
No shit, because in here, this place won, right? So you win. This is what we did. And you just couldn't walk in and say, hey, let me go in here. It's like it's separate from the rest of the school. So it's kind of neat. I've been in here since, not even one time have I been in there. It's going to be different, but there's some good memories here.
Okay.
Guys with their pre-game rituals that were bizarre.
All right.
You know.
Watch yourself here.
Here we go, look at that. This is my area right here.
Was that your area?
Yeah.
So how do you feel right now?
This is very cool. The feeling of privilege.
Nice.
Thank you guys, you know. I don't know if maybe it's just me, but there was a sense of secret. This is our area. You just can't roll up in here.
So this is secret
and
society,
This is definitely a place that the people before me that won came through here. So it's very neat.
So once again, the workhorse, the guy from London, Ontario.
Jamie became part of the boxing that took place here, and he worked his way up. He was good, and
It was great.
Eventually he went and boxed and represented Canada. And in the community that we lived, they got a children's group around, and Jamie took care of all the kids in the neighborhood. So he was looked up to by a lot of people.
His smile radiates until it makes you, it doesn't matter what day you're having.
Jamie had a great spirit. You know, our parents separated and divorced when we were quite young.
Yes.
So Jamie filled the shoes of my dad, basically. He was the oldest.
Yeah.
And took care of us all. He was a very caring soul. Jamie drowned, saving his best friend, who was Mark Mainstone, up in Port Stanley in 1986 in June on the 16th, and they both perished that day. He made 3 attempts to save Mark. Jamie was the stronger swimmer.
Yeah.
But yeah, they both unfortunately perished that day. But he was honored, a hero in our family, for even going off the pier and making those attempts to save Mark.
To honor the Jamie brothers' memory, the Boys and Girls Club of London have an award named after him.
So this recognizes an individual boy or girl who excels in athletics, but also is a mentor of the club, someone who embodies the entire spirit of the Boys and Girls Clubs.
On my journey, I heard of an old black cemetery just down the road in Norwich Township, one of the stops on the Underground Railroad.
We always saw when the blacks were coming through to settle in the Wilberforce settlement that they just stopped off in South Norwich around the Otterville area, which didn't turn out to be the case. What really happened was the owners of the mills in Otterville, Otterville had several mills, and the owners were Quaker and were also very strong abolitionists. But basically, they were protection. Quaker settlement was going to be protection.
Mothers wanted their children to be little Shirley Temples.
Okay.
And so anyway, my mother was no exception, and she, unfortunately, I couldn't be a little Shirley Temple.
No,
so,
of course not.
No blonde ringlets
That's
or anything.
Right, that's right.
So anyway, she settled on Bill Bojangles Robinson, who was the tap dancer, the black tap dancer that danced in the Shirley Temple movies.
Right.
So she enrolled me in tap school at the Holloway Twins School of Dance. Well, my mother enrolled me when I was 3.5 years old, and I took lessons till I was, let me think now, 9 years old.
Okay. Tap dancing is actually a form of an instrument. That's your feet are an instrument.
That's right.
That's amazing.
And that's what I found out. Like, I found that I had the trebles, but I had different trebles. I had one treble on the right foot and a treble on the left. They're different sounds. And then you can start getting sounds with your dancing, and then you lighten and soften. And a drummer drums. He drums. His right foot hits the bass. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
1, and right on the beat. Boom, like dum 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 dum. It's a 1, 2, 3.
Right.
1 and 3. See?
Gotcha.
Now on the I danced on the 2 and 4, which is the hi hat, which is left foot, and you go boom, boom, chip, boom, chip, boom. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 and 4. So I danced on 2 and 4. So I always danced on the offbeat, like that. It's swinging, always swinging. I did the show for Jack Arthur at the Cassini Grandstand show, and I was sitting there, and Jack came in and he said, what are your aspirations? And I said, well, I always wanted to do the Casino Theater because all the great tap dancers had done it. And so I did that. I said, I've always wanted to do the Cassini Grandstand because it was the biggest grandstand show in Canada, and I'm doing it now. And he said, and then the third, and I said, the Ed Sullivan Show. So he said, oh, well, you've got something to look forward to. I went to the CBC, and I knew one of the fellas there, and I said, is there any way I can get a Kinney, because I think I can get the Ed Sullivan Show. He said, come back tomorrow. So he handed me the Kinney. I said, how much do I owe you, you know? He said, you owe me to get on that Ed Sullivan Show.
Right away, no sad thoughts when you sing, oh Canada, all your blues disappear. When you hear, oh Canada, separate for the cause, either right or wrong, please pause, or we'll lose, oh Canada, sing the song with me now. Oh Canada, my love, strong, proud, and free, my love.
My manager, who was George Sikornik at the time, and he was a wonderful man, wonderful, and he flew me to New York, and we were at a hotel, and Eddie Alcourt came over, got the Kinney, and he went over to the Ed Sullivan Show. So when the Kinney came in, he said, who's this Joey Hollings? He's from Canada. He said, well, he's going to be on our show. Oh, he said, if he's going to be on your show, he's good enough for my show. And he didn't even look at the Kinney, and he put me on the show.
Catch babies? A cat? But you're looking at the real one right now!
When Sullivan likes you, he comes over and he shakes your hand. That was the signature thing.
Yes, yes.
So what happened was, he came over and he said, well, let's really hear it for our really good friend all the way from Toronto, Canada.
Stop what you're doing now. Yeah, walk a mile in my shoes. Before you accuse, criticize and abuse.
This is some of the things that I do. Robinson steps.
Okay.
I'm old now. Can't do that anymore.
I don't think you're old, Joey. It's all in the mind. I found myself taking a walk with Don Menard again. this time at Richard B. Harrison Park.
This is another one of the unknown stories of London and early London folks. And again, it ties directly, obviously, to the black experience here in London.
Right.
Harrison was the son of fugitive slaves who came to London in the early 1860s. Born here in 64, as you said, and then went on, after a long struggle and a long life of hard work, went on to achieve fairly important success as a well-known Broadway theatrical star. He made it at age 65 on this tour with Green Pastures. They came to London, and so they had 3 performances in London in 1934, shortly before his death, actually. So it was great that he could come back to his old haunts.
Isn't that something?
And do the play
Isn't that
for which he had
something?
achieved his fame.
He came full circle.
He did.
And the theater was originally about 1,800 seats. At the time, the theater served the whole region.
But I'm strong. I'm strong enough to carry it. 'Cause he ain't heavy. He's my brother.
A man named, and we can never forget, Ivan Box.
Who is that?
Who he was a promoter in the city who just liked the talent that was happening here.
Okay.
He really believed in what the kids around the city were doing, and he put on these events at White Oak Park, and he put things in the at the NAC, and he really provided a place and a venue for us who really weren't professionals at that time to do it. But he put us on quite a bit.
It kind of coincided with this big bump in urban culture, right? So there was young hip hop and R&B groups singing and dancing and stuff like that, and we played these talent shows, and we just kept going.
Wow.
And it was young Canadian hip hop. It was all local. We all had. There were rappers, there were dancers, there were R&B artists, and there was us, and there was all different types of things going on. Ivan would put these really neat shows together where he'd invite all the young people from the city, and we'd have these big dances and big shows, and people would be going crazy and screaming, and every act that came on was about a 15-minute slot, but it all made sense.
People know us as the Macauley Boys because that's when we first came out.
Exactly.
So it actually is our name and how people more recognize us.
Okay.
They know we're all brothers now. I mean, you know, people do their research. You got
Of course.
Oh, the Macauley Boys, those Macauley Boys,
Right,
the
right,
Macauley
right,
Boys.
right.
And then that just stuck.
It was as simple as Dad whistling in the house. He had a whistle like a world-class whistler.
Did he?
And when we were brought up in the house, that's all we ever heard was
Okay.
him kicking out these tones. So music was always in our environment.
Kids know me to be one who's been fond of good music, listening to quite a variety of music, beating rhythms on the table, and doing that sort of stuff. So, you know, I think they pick up some of that stuff from me.
We all started playing piano when we were from an early age. I started when I was 4, I think, on the organ, and then formally started taking piano lessons when I was 5.
When you talk about nurturing the talent, the musical talent that we all have some musical background.
Yes.
But she's the one who's always been there to make sure that, you know, they did their music lessons and that sort of stuff like that. So she had a more active role in that.
That was the injection of music into our house and in our environment.
In another lifetime, it will be the right time to fall in love once again. In another lifetime, it will be the right time to fall in love once again. In another lifetime, it will be the right time for you and me.
I had a chat with the founders of the Caribbean Culture Association.
In 1977, West Indian had just started gathering in London. Like, there was a lot of black folks here, but they were Canadians.
Yes, yes.
So the West Indian began to meet in the city, and we felt that it was a need for us to form a common meeting area, so we did.
It was a general meeting place. If you was in need of a hall for a wedding, you could come to the Caribbean Club.
Yes.
The hall was available for you.
Yes.
Funerals, reception, the hall was available for you. We had what we call the seniors dinner at Christmas.
Yeah.
And what we do, it says, if you're black and you're 65, come and have a free meal and drink all you can drink.
Yeah.
We would
Are you
open,
kidding?
We would open the bar and fill themselves an old myrtle. We'd get to the kitchen and we would cook turkeys, roast beef, and just lay it out. So the Caribbean Club wasn't for us, it was for the community. So basically it was a non-charitable organization. So nobody made any money out of it. Everything we made went back into the community. So that's why we was able to do all of this.
Well, I was 4 years old when I wrote my first song, but as time went on, it took me a little bit of time to really get into music. I would go with my parents to different churches, and they would allow me to sing here and there. And then I would get involved in choirs and sing in choirs. And then as I grew into my teenage years, I found that, this is something that I feel like I might want to pursue. And then as time went on, I met producers that were interested in getting involved in my musical career. And so I had an opportunity to meet people who were in the music industry, and they started to help me to move to the next level. I ended up getting a music scholarship to go to Atlanta, Georgia. And when I took that scholarship, it allowed me to start to really think about pursuing my career and starting recording. And that's when I started going into the studio and late nights in the studio. And my brothers would come with me, and feeling like this was something that I really felt like I could do this for the rest of my life. And so I've been able to do that. I know it seems your dreams have led you far away from home, and only left you crying, feeling lost and all alone. But if you'll take some time to just look up and never down, you'll see that everything is waiting way above the ground. So fly, even if your heart was broken. Fly, for you can get to where you want to if you only just try. Speak louder than you've ever spoken. Fly higher than the sky. Just fly. You can fly if you want to and you try. I know. Spread your wings and fly.
One of the staples of Black history in London is the Dawn of Tomorrow newspaper. Started in 1921 by James Jenkins in his family home on 95 Glenwood Avenue. The paper focused on the accomplishments of Black Canadians, promoted community pride, and became one of the first public voices for Blacks in Canada.
I think it may have been of someone saying that there needed to be a paper published about the Black people around.
Yeah. What was it called? What's it called?
The Dawn of Tomorrow.
How did he come up with that name?
Well, I wouldn't ask him, but I presume he came up with it because there were going to be better days.
The paper ran for over 40 years, helping build Black identity throughout the entire country. Faith has been one of the founding principles of Black culture in London. Originally built in 1848, the Fugitive Slave Chapel was one of the first Black expressions of the Holy Spirit. I originally visited the chapel on Thames Street back when it was only a dream to have it preserved. But someone was watching over it, because on November the 12th, 2014, something blessed happened.
Today, we see history in the making that you'll never see again.
No.
What's happening today, and then you look and see that so many people got involved in this project.
That's right.
That it tells you about what it means to the city of London, and even to this community here.
With the help of the city, utilities, contractors, and the community, the chapel made a historic drive through the core of London before arriving at its new home beside its successor, the British Methodist Episcopal Church on Grey Street.
The day of our sod turning,
yes,
the theme for the sod turning was putting down a foundation of love, a legacy of love, if you like.
The BME Church itself has deep roots in the city.
I was reading some of a part of the history, and I think something is mentioned that it used to be where the Beth congregation used to worship.
That church, the one that they moved, they bought it in the land in 1848, and then we believe it went to about 1869 when they sold it. Part of the issue is that this is the BME Church,
right,
which
British
is
Methodist Episcopal.
And originally it was the AME Church, American Methodist Episcopal.
Right.
The big problem that we have is we know in other communities in Canada there was actually schism splits between the AME and BME churches.
Okay.
It's entirely possible. Now, city records show this 1870, but it's entirely possible that the two communities coexisted side by side.
The church has been a staple in the Black community throughout the decades in the city's history books, providing a place for Blacks to love, learn, congregate, and worship, a role it continues to serve for this community to this day.
You can see the rumblings of the Black spirit, in and around London.
If you want to change or you're looking for change, you go to church.
We're so lucky to have a diverse community here in London today, and as we look forward to the future, that's only going to grow. Our diversity makes us stronger as a community. It's something that we need to celebrate.
We've had beautiful experiences in London.
My network was already multicultural, so to speak. If I'm playing hockey, I'm not playing with all Black guys in the street. On road hockey, I'm just like anybody else.
Well, I think it's a learned behavior. Because, you watch little kids play. They don't see color.
No, they don't see color.
And it's apt
no,
to.
they're colorblind, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I would say the face of London is changing, and that's a good thing.
It's all about treating others as you'd want to be treated.
Any racism, which I don't see anymore because we have our own home, the good of London overweighs that.
When you're going out of your house now, and I mean it's your neighbors, you can see people that reflect the city.
All of us didn't decide what color or whatever. We couldn't give a heck about it. Where you're from, are you a decent individual, and we'll give you a start.
London, Ontario has been a good place for us to raise our 4 boys.
I think that Londoners, particularly Black Londoners, should take great pride in the way that the former slaves conducted themselves in London and how they contributed to the growth of London.
A diverse London does not mean that prejudice has magically disappeared. But prejudice does not have to define someone either.
One of the key things I taught my kids is not only believing myself, but also anyone who would attempt to affront them, by, this regular name calling and all sort of stuff. There's a certain amount of insulation that one can use to ward off these things. And that is to believe that people who are morally strong, people who have substance, people who have culture, people who are decent would not engage in trying to, put other people down. So what it does to a person is to know that the source of whatever sort of any of those name callings or any sort of put downs, you know where they're coming from. So you're able to ward it off. Anytime anyone tries to put you down by calling you names and also, you know where it's coming from. Right. So you don't really need to attend to it. It's a distraction, something that throws you off balance.
People will react, which is emotional.
Yes.
When you respond, you're being rational. So I've learned how to be rational in those times of moments where you have to take a pause for the
Which
cause
is
and
great.
say,
Because a lot of people get their back up and it's like right away.
Well, because of the oppression of black people and all this stuff that's happening, blah, blah, blah. It's easy for us to jump on that bandwagon.
Sure,
it is. But the truth is, you're in the reality of the here and now.
Exactly.
And you can't apply 50 years of, or 60 or 100 years of slavery to apply to here.
No, you can't. I agree with you.
Don't buy into the stereotypes that mass media has on you. I think one of the greatest things is that you have to actually look at yourself and believe that, number one, you matter. And I think in addition to that is really going out, for example, if you're a student or a young man in the school system, and if you don't see yourself reflected, I think it's reasonable to share this concern with the staff.
The murder of another brother. He was a renegade. He was a menace. He had a sentence waiting to happen anyways because the pigment of skin attracted attention like Michael Jackson when he would hit the stage. I don't condone violence. I don't know another way though. Still young, seeing shadows.
It's happening in the schools, or it's happening wherever it's happening, in homes and things like that. And sometimes Caucasians don't know that it's offensive.
True.
And I think one of the reasons why is because we don't converse with one another. We don't do a lot of talking about these issues.
Yes.
And so I think that that's something that I think needs to be done more.
Yes, I agree.
We need to open up more one to another, sharing what our experiences are.
The Emancipation Day celebration, held annually in London since the early 1920s, has been a joyous occasion for all blacks who come throughout the years. A day that celebrates freedom from the shackles of slavery. The event began at Springbank Park by the Family Community Club. The tradition is continued on today at the Meeting Tree and is well attended by many Londoners. London's history is rich with stories, but perhaps none are more interesting than its own black history. From its early days to today, these proud residents have and will continue to make history each and every day.
Like a mother, this great tree sheltered and protected them. When I touch her bark and close my eyes, I feel a warmth, and I swear I feel a beating heart. Her branches reach out and back through time and through history, as they reached back at that time towards the south, beckoning to those people, those human beings who had been so cruelly ripped from their homes and then held in captivity for generations.
What was the name that you chose?
Finding Freedom in Forest City.
Tell me, how did you come up with the name,
Because slaves were trying to fight for freedom, when London was a forest city.
That's right, precisely. So Lauren, how old are you?
9.